This episode of the All About Nothing podcast is sponsored by Soul House Sessions at the Koger Center for the Arts, hosted by Preach Jacobs of the Preach Jacobs podcast. Tickets for April 13th with featured guest, renowned culinary historian, author, and educator Michael Twitty are available now. Visit KogerCenterForTheArts.com or follow at Preach Jacobs on Instagram for details and tickets, or check the show notes. Do it right now. Seriously, hit pause, do it now, because this show will sell out. Soul House at the Koger Center with Preach Jacobs and guest Michael Twitty, April 13th. Do it now before you miss your chance.
The All About Nothing podcast may have language and content
that isn't appropriate for some.
Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, Nothingers, to the All About Nothing podcast. This is episode number 301. I am Barrett Gruber. No Zach this week. Please make sure that you subscribe and share the show. Also, if you could, please consider supporting the show financially by visiting theallaboutnothing.com and becoming an official member and proudly calling yourself a true Nothinger. We'll have more details on that at the end of the show. If you can't do that, please give us a 5-star review, a like, and follow us across all of social media. You can find links at theallaboutnothing.com. Real quick, want to thank Frank Spring for being our guest a couple weeks ago. He was fantastic. If you haven't heard that episode, please go back and check it out. Episode number 299. As well, I want to thank Luke Basso for also being our guest on the last episode number 300. Luke talks about how he just came back from Afghanistan, where he got to interview some veterans as well as some of the Ukrainian military personnel over there for his page, Filmperia 1945, over there on YouTube. So go check those episodes out. Today we are joined by a man who has been a force in South Carolina politics for years, building grassroots power and organizing for the unheard voices in the state. Brandon Upson is a veteran, an Obama Foundation USA leader, and the executive director of the New Progressive South. He has spent his career organizing strikes for service workers and registering tens of thousands of voters through initiatives like Amplify Action. Now he's taken on the new role as campaign manager for Brandon P. Brown's run for the U.S. Senate. Brandon, you've often said that people vote, money doesn't. And today we're going to be talking about how putting the philosophy into practice in one of the most watched races in South Carolina. Brandon, welcome finally to the show. And first, let me just say, I'm not going to hold it against you that you haven't come on the show previous to this. I've asked, right?
Well, I wanted to make sure I had something to talk about.
I feel 100% certain you have almost always got something to talk about. I think the first time we met was either at one of the Democratic Palmetto dinners, or it was at your birthday party. I feel like it might have been your birthday party.
I think it was my birthday party first. Yep.
Yeah. So how old are we now? We're 39, 40?
No, I'm 40 now. Mike, you see all this?
Oh, gosh.
That's a 40-year-old gray coming in there. And it's not even gray. It's just white.
There's no comparison. There's no comparison. Man. Brandon, do me a favor. Tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say episode 301, congratulations, man. You're out here putting out great content. It's hard to do that on a regular basis, and you happen to do it. So I enjoy what you do. I try to like, share, comment, and subscribe on TikTok and all the other things I follow closely. But
you read that script well. Thank you very much.
But man, I grew up in horse and golf country over in Aiken, South Carolina. Although, growing up, my uncles were grooming horses. We didn't really ride them as much. And we worked on the golf course and didn't play as much. So, it's the tale of two cities. But that gave me a lot of exposure to, different walks of life very early on. Growing up in Aiken, a lot of kids from the north side who didn't have much went to school with kids that had parents that worked at the Savannah Riverside, who was making 6 and 7 figures. And, we kind of meld together. There was a study talking about our dialect from my generation, because we don't sound like everybody else in Aiken. It's kind of weird, but it gives you a different perspective, so to speak. But grew up in Aiken. My mom is number 7 of like a dozen kids. Then,
Oh my gosh.
between my mom and dad, I'm the second oldest of 6. And there might be some others out there. My God bless my father.
You got one of those too, huh?
Yeah.
I'm even at the age of 47. I'm reminded there's the potential that there may be another sibling out there somewhere. He says there's not, but you never know.
Well, mine says there might be. So
okay, there you go.
He's very honest about it. But growing up where I did, my grandmother was the one that really was the driving force behind me. I was one of those kids. I was born in a time when my family was going through grief. My great grandfather passed away. And just before him, my great uncle passed away. And then I was born. So everybody kind of put all their love and attention into me growing up. And I just grew up as a leader in my family. And my grandmother was always telling me, I want you to enjoy your childhood. Stop being an old man. But I would sit on the porch with her or my grandfather, my great grandmother, and they would tell me stories about our family's history. And always telling me, my grandfather would always say, don't be an educated fool. My grandmother would tell me, don't forget where you came from. And my great grandmother would tell me, don't put any limits on yourself. And that was just constantly reinforced in me to where, I joined the South Carolina Army National Guard when I was a junior in high school. The recruiter told me I would never go to Iraq. But then my name was number 1 on the deployment list, even though my last name is Upson. And I went to Iraq, did security. I did a whole bunch of crazy stuff. I did over 100 combat missions while I was there. Did security for one of their first democratic elections, where I saw people risking their lives, literally risking their lives to vote. And then I came home to some of my family members not even interested in voting, saying their vote didn't count. So immediately I figured out where our voter registration office was, because being a military person, those first couple of years I voted absentee, and they just sent it to me when I was in basic training, AIT, deployed in Iraq and Kuwait. The ballot just always showed up. So I made sure that every member of my family was registered to vote. And every member of the Upson family has voted in every election since I've come back home from Iraq. And, 1, 2, skip a few. And I go from volunteering to getting my first paid gig with Obama's organization, Organizers for America. Got mentored by Abe Jenkins and Robert Flood. And then worked for not Joe Biden, but Joe Riley, the mayor of Charleston. Okay. Became his first African-American campaign manager. And then he sent me around the country and I learned more. And, 16 years later, here I am, still at it, still fighting the fight, still representing for the outcasts and the unheard and the forgotten. But it's a mission that has to grow and continue.
How about the fact that in 2026, in the state of South Carolina, we have every single House district is being represented by a candidate running on the Democratic ticket. I mean, in 2024, what was it? 60? There were 60 something seats that were contested.
Right.
We left nearly half of the election just but how exceptional is that for 2026?
I always ask people all the time, do you believe that businesses should have a monopoly? If you don't, then you should agree that one party should not have a monopoly. And the fact that we're finally giving people an option is better for the voters and the people than it is for any party organization in our state. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. It is definitely a feat that, should not be, out of the norm in our democracy, even here in South Carolina. But I'm so excited that the day has finally come where we're giving people options in every, state house race across this state.
Yeah.
They deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to get too far into it without at least thanking you for your service. That is a sacrifice, I think, that in today's times, I don't think people acknowledge just how big a deal it is to say, I'm going to go and serve, and then to get called up into a war and make it home safely is fantastic. So thank you very much for your service. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I want to talk about some of the grassroots that you've worked in. You've famously said that you aren't looking for donors as much as you're looking for an army. So how do you keep a volunteer-led movement disciplined and focused over such a long, grueling Senate cycle?
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's all about the mission. A lot of what I do, it goes back to either my military training or my Obama training from back in the days. And that discipline helps you understand how to maintain morale over grueling battles, and also how to keep people mission focused, because the mission has to be bigger than one person or one group of people. And when you can do those two things, you can give people the endurance to march on further than even what they thought was possible. That's how I know you on the beginning. You said I registered tens of thousands of people, but I've actually registered over 500,000 young African Americans across the South, all volunteer led work, right? With this campaign cycle here in this U.S. Senate race in South Carolina, very quickly we amassed an organization of over 1,000 volunteers for Brandon Brown across the state, and it's growing. Now we have other candidates that have gotten in the race, running for Secretary of State, some running for agriculture and state house races now, and congressional races. And they're bringing their folks to the table. And this is something where if you can connect to the important issues that impact people and show them how their actions can bring solutions to those issues, they will work night and day. You have to not just make it real because it's already real for them. You have to make it known that you understand their pain and their struggle, and you're not using them in this exchange of, if you work here and get me elected, that's the whole exchange. It's, we're in this together, because when you hurt, I hurt. That's community. We're in this together because I've been where you've been before, or I understand where you're coming from. I empathize with you. And together we can make sure that you, or at least the next generation, don't have to fight the same battles that you're fighting. One, for instance, case that I want to share. Just think about in Denmark, South Carolina, a couple years ago, where folks were screaming out that their water was not safe to drink or bathe in. And their local government for a long time said, "Oh, no, it's nothing to see here. There's no issue." Then it came out in the news and CNN and all this other stuff that, in fact, it was an issue. And the people that rung the bell were treated like outcasts and treated like they were just, rabble-rousers and trying to start trouble. Well, we clean it up in Denmark, and then we figure out it's happening in Seneca and Greenwood and Sumter, and Dillon. And then the report comes out and says, well, over 94% of our waterways have forever chemicals in it. So now there's a larger issue that we're all facing. And just when you are over in my hometown of Aiken thinking, well, that's happening over there, it's not a problem for me. It actually is. And that's what we're trying to get people to understand. No matter
Yeah.
what island you think you're on, you're still connected below the surface of the water. We're all
Yeah.
connected, and what impacts one of us impacts us all.
Yeah. It's a weird disconnect to think that your small town or village or city or whatever in South Carolina is somehow immune to what could potentially going on over in North or over in Lawrence or things like that. Like the power the power here in South Carolina has over the last, especially the last 23 years, has neglected the people of South Carolina, whether it's the people that we elect for federal office or the people that have been elected and hold, the power here in the state house. Like it has been decades of just neglect of the people of the state of South Carolina. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's and I grew up in Atlanta, where I lived inside the 285 perimeter most of my life before I moved here to South Carolina, and it didn't happen,
Right.
And I don't want to toot the horn, but I mean, Atlanta was run by Democrats, and for the most part still is. So
Yeah.
but that's one of the to me that's one of the big differences that I've learned over my nearly 5 decades is that there seems to be a recognition of what it is that state and federal government is supposed to do for the people of the country, or the state or the county, and in reflection of what they're elected, the responsibilities. And one of those things is to make sure the safety and infrastructure for the people that live in the communities that you represent. And there's at least one party in the state that doesn't seem to recognize that. And over and over, I have to constantly remind people, no, the crime in South Carolina is now in the top 10, per capita in the nation. And that has happened really since 2003 as the party that's in control has continued to just gerrymander their way into more control. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
One of my mentors, Robert Ford, down in Charleston, former state senator. You gotta love him. He's that he's been that grumpy uncle for a very long time. But he says all the time, the number one responsibility of an elected official is to make sure that the lives of the people they serve is better than when they first got elected. That is your number one
100%.
responsibility. If you're going to get elected just to maintain the status quo, then you're wasting everybody's time, right? But what we've seen in South Carolina under this one party rule monopoly, a political monopoly, is that they haven't maintained the status quo. They've actually pulled our state down into the gutter in so many ways. When you talk about the rise of violent crime and our placement of violent crime, even with our education scores, our opportunity scores, our mental health, our overall health, whether that's diabetes, high blood pressure, hypertension, amputations, heart attacks, strokes, all of it, it comes down to one thing. It comes down to poverty. We have chronic generational poverty in our state, and barriers to access to opportunity and resources that prevent people from coming out of these cycles of poverty. And what our elected officials who are running things right now have been able to do is keep a huge class divide in our state that says, if you're not one of us, you're relegated to the crumbs or wishing that you could have a crumb of an opportunity. It's almost like one of the civil rights guys I had a chance to meet, Mr. Herbert Fielding, down in Charleston, South Carolina. He told me one time they did a study on the state representatives and found that over 60% of the state representatives in Columbia were descendants of plantation owners. And
Wow.
their jobs, he felt, in his opinion, their jobs was to maintain class order in the state of South Carolina. And it's hard to deny that when you look at how, no matter what your race is, your class and economic income and station in South Carolina, you're supposed to know your place and stay in your place and let the big boys handle the business. But that is really hurting us all.
Yeah, 100%. I want to go back to your registering of Black men and service workers. Like you said, I had 10,000. I just look. It's hundreds of thousands of Black men and service workers. How is this campaign specifically designed to bring those non-voters back into the fold?
Oh my goodness. First off, it's who are you talking to and when are you talking to them? We have a tradition of waiting to the ninth hour to go and say, oh, wait, we got to talk to Black people. Like they got to vote and we got to remind them to vote and ask them to vote for our candidate. But that just becomes a transactional activity where fewer and fewer specifically young Black voters even want to participate because they don't feel like they're getting anything out of it. The last time you came here, you told me this was the most important election of our generation and that if we didn't go out and vote, the sky was going to fall. Well, I voted and it still feels like the sky is falling and y'all lost, So what are you saying here? And then if you do win, you win and you can't even talk about my issue. You're going in there talking about things that you didn't even campaign on when you were at my doorstep or at my school, at my job, on my phone, in my text and DMs. So there's a sense of lost trust and a sense that these elected officials and politicians are just using us for our skin color and our vote. So when it comes down to this election, especially with Brandon Brown, we turn that strategy up on its head. We're not going to wait to talk to African Americans until, the election's in June, until the end of May. We're going to start our conversations there because this demographic deserves to be centered, at least, I don't want to say for the first time, but for the first time in a long time, a lot of African American candidates run away from being an African American candidate because they don't want to be relegated to the corner and then reprimanded for not speaking to a diverse audience. Well, just because I'm talking to, Black and African American and brown candidates don't mean I'm not talking to a diverse audience. Like I'm sitting here, I'm in the front yard in Taylor, South Carolina, of Mr. Benny Brown, and we're on his family. I call it the family compound because they own everything out here, and everybody out here is a family member. But they, and they're telling me, how they had back in the 20s, their grandfather had folks that looked like you, bro, working on their farm. So it is a story that you don't hear often, but these are the stories and the conversations that we're finding as we're out here having talking to people and building this network and this web of community members who are willing to turn their voice into action by voting. Now, one last thing here. Oftentimes, since 2020, we've seen a steady decline in the overall number of African Americans participating in voting. In many of our counties, that number has decreased by more than 20%. If you look over in Chester County and then over in Dillon County, other places, even Orangeburg is having a slip. And it's a solid, African-American county. But when you look at these places and you talk to folks, you ask them why. This last spring, we did a community canvas in Lancaster, York, and Chester County and just asked, what matters to you? And what do you think is the solution to that issue? And if voting isn't, why not? But if it is, why aren't you voting? And a lot of them are saying, well, I don't have a reason to vote. And nothing's proven that my vote actually counts. So what we've been doing with this campaign is having that conversation across the state, in the churches. We were literally in the basement of a church up here in Greenville, South Carolina. We were literally under the shade tree over in Mullins, South Carolina, not just a couple of days ago, talking to a group of men who just believe that nothing they did and that voting booth counted for anything. But when we left there, they were committed to vote, and we had already signed them up and scheduled when we would come back, or somebody would come back and drive them to go vote. Like, that is the ground. That's the groundwork. We're not going to leave anything to chance. You know, for the folks that we need to pick up and take over to go vote, we're going to do that. For everyone else that we can motivate to get out and vote themselves, we're focused on that 110%. And the very last thing I'll say is, when you look at this election, especially in the primary electorate are the most motivated members of your party. And when that group of motivated members of your party gets smaller and smaller, that shows that your party has smaller and smaller chances of flipping the state or flipping seats. If we can expand that number, that gets us closer to our goal. So flipping the state in November becomes an easier process. Our base gets us to the finish line, but then those other voters that we gain, the independents and the crossovers, will get us through the finish line. But if we go into the summer and the fall still talking to our base, we're never going to have a victory in this state.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm reminded of one of the interactions that I had when I was canvassing for Matt Villartabo last 2024. And that was, a woman asked me, she said, what's the point in, I don't even know that my vote counts. And I said, the only thing that I can guarantee you is that if you don't at least vote, then your vote didn't count. That's the only thing I can guarantee you. Yeah. Going out and supporting the candidate that you feel best represents you or that will best represent you gives you the best opportunity to try and convince someone else that they should absolutely go and vote. It's one of those things that voting, the idea of voting is something that is extremely contagious. It becomes part of the group think. As long as you can get one or two, then it will spread like a pandemic across, as much as it needs to. And I think that's one of the things in South Carolina is that I've noticed is that, this is an extremely diverse state. It isn't the power that is in place right now is not representative of who it is that the state is made up of. So, kudos to you and all the work that you all have been doing. You mentioned Orangeburg. What made you all choose Orangeburg as one of the sites for your campaign office this time around?
Yeah, because it's right there, a stone's throw from both campuses. We already have, Brandon's a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. We got a bunch of Divine Nine people over here. So we're tapping into those college students, and they're bringing a lot of energy and ideas to the campaign.
Yeah. You've worked with many, many leaders. What was the specific it factor that made you decide to step in as the campaign manager for Brandon P. Brown?
Man, I said I wasn't going to do this again.
We always say that.
I said I was done. But the thing is, Brandon is a friend, and he's been there literally every time I've called. And the one time that he called me, I couldn't say no. Now, I did say, hey, I will be your senior advisor and I'll find you a campaign manager. I'm still looking.
That's all right. When I went to Matt Villartabo's announcement as somebody that was just, I was there to help him with his campaign. And then he announced me as his campaign manager. And it's like, and I'm on the ride home. Yeah, I'm on the ride home with a friend of mine who came up with me. And she literally goes, Did you know you were going to be his campaign manager? I had no idea. That seems to be the way that we fall into these things, right?
It is. But I just got to shout out Matt. Matt is an amazing man, amazing warrior for the cause and for the little guy, and the fact that he's running for office is the most inhumane thing you can do to yourself, right? And the fact that he was willing to put himself out there so many times, that is just I got to tip my hat to him.
Yeah, York and Rock Hill and Fort Mill is definitely losing a soldier when it comes to the departure of Matt. He just recently made the announcement that he is going to be leaving South Carolina the end of May. I wish him well. I'm disappointed, but I can't look. It's a hostage situation if I keep him here. So,
I'll bring the duct tape, bro.
Central. All right. Look, don't make offers that you can't hold up to. Yeah. Between the two of us, I think the reason I've not run for anything yet is the skeletons. Yeah. Just so this is a central theme in the campaign of this campaign. Can you give us a concrete example of the purpose over power? Sorry, I skipped that part. Being a central part of the campaign, can you give us a concrete example of a policy or decision where Brandon Brown has he chooses purpose over the more politically safe or powerful option?
Oh man, so out the gate, if you look at his policy initiative called the Fair Shot Agenda. This is a values-driven, rights-driven agenda that expands what we consider to be human rights and protected rights here in America. Folks don't realize when you run for the United States Senate, you may be from South Carolina, but you're representing the country, so what you get passed will impact everyone across the country. Now, in comparison to Lindsey Graham has been willing to forfeit, to undermine folks' rights, their voting rights, their due process, their birthright citizenship, their right of place, their rights to safety, their rights to education, all because he is willing to put it all on the table so he can be in proximity to power. Not even just to have power himself. Imagine that. Someone is willing to put you on the chopping block just so they can be in proximity to power. Now, somebody like that, I wouldn't trust them to walk my dog, yet alone represent me in the United States Senate. Brandon Brown has been willing to not just sacrifice, his name, his business, his career, in order to run on the topics he's running on, but he's doing it because it's the right thing, and it's the right thing for the people.
So the constitutional narrative, the campaign is emphasized on protecting the Constitution. So how do you explain to a skeptical voter that Brandon P. Brown's interpretation of those rights serves them better than just the status quo?
Yeah, and here's the thing. In a lot of what we're arguing here, there's case law to back us up. There's also tangible and measurable evidence to back us up. And it would, in Brandon's case, and some of the navigation of the bureaucracy to get this done, he has the experience doing it. From working with Joe Biden back when he was a Vice President Joe Biden, to eventually President Joe Biden, to then being in an elected position himself as Deputy Tax Commissioner. He's navigated these systems to bring results forward. Now, for the skeptics out here, if this is what I'll say, your rights that are protected by the United States Constitution are is the one thing that stops the Trump administration from completely dismantling our democracy, putting you into a class, a permanent class of subservient uh, uh, folks with no voice, and it stops them from completely um, uh, removing the things that define your place in this country, which is what they're
Yeah.
trying to do, right? Now, in terms of, why we should protect that, we need to protect the definition of who's an American and what how do you become an American beyond, getting a Trump gold card because you have wealth, right? We need to make sure that you have due process and no one can just come in your home or your place of worship, your school, your job, snatch you up and detain you without, explaining why, reading your rights, or adhering to the outline process of your humanity. Like what we see is just beyond a constitutional violation is a humanity as crimes against humanity is what we're witnessing in many cases. This campaign is telling us what can be if we elect the right people to go serve us in Congress. This campaign is telling you, if you're watching, that Brandon Brown is willing to go to DC and lock arms and build coalition with the folks who believe that your humanity should be recognized and respected at every level of law and at every level of our democracy. It's telling you what's possible. And there are other good folks in DC, they're just outnumbered. Even when we think about the possibility of flipping the Senate, because I believe wholeheartedly we're going to flip the House. Flipping the Senate, I've been saying this for a year that it's possible, and folks are finally grabbing onto that idea. Because if we can flip Georgia and if we can flip North Carolina, South Carolina can be flipped as well because our numbers are very competitive. And when you look at what's happening in the political shifts that are happening in the upstate and in the low country, and then you look at the margins that are left on the table in the Midlands, if we fill those gaps, we can win. We just
Yeah,
need you to believe.
absolutely.
We just
Absolutely
need
agree.
folks to believe.
It's one of those situations where we need representatives that are going to be a speed bump in whatever it is this project plan is that the Trump administration has.
Project
And
2025 isn't going because it's 2026. It's a
right.
blueprint.
Oh yeah.
It's a living document.
No. And also I think I saw the last time I looked at Polymarket, I think has the percentage chance of the Democrats flipping the Senate right now is at 49%. That's huge. I get people are going to look at that and be like, well, it's not higher than 50. No. If it was 10%, I would still, we're not looking at we're looking at a 1-to-1 right now, basically, the likelihood that Democrats can flip the Senate. And to have Brandon P. Brown as the next junior senator from the state of South Carolina, I don't really like the promotion that it gives to Tim Scott, but, I'll take it. South Carolina is often painted as as a monolith. So how does Brandon speak to the upstate differently than lower state while maintaining the same core message?
Yeah, and it is not even regional like that. We have 46 counties, and that's 46 different mentalities, cultures, way of thinking, issues, and you got to be able to go into those communities, speak their language, and connect it to the message. I know in your past episode, our friend was talking about creating the story, the narrative, and in every place we go, Brandon tells the story about what's possible, but he integrates their stories into his, right? So, if we're going to Seneca, which we're going to go to Seneca, we're talking about the drinking water issue that they're having there. And how does that story integrate into what's possible? When we go down to Georgetown, which we're about to go to, where the steel mill, the paper mill, and the other big employment center there in Georgetown shut down. It's gone.
Yeah.
Bye bye. Never to come back again. We're integrating those stories of those families who are now, their husband or wife was making six figures or 60 grand a month in some cases, which is good money down there in Georgetown. And now they're
Yeah.
sleeping on a family member's couch. We're telling their story and integrating into this narrative arc about what's possible. Because the thing is, even in Limestone College shutting down, and now you got all those faculty teachers in Gaffney that lost their job and now trying to figure out what they're going to do next. The thing is, when you have a senator who understands your struggle, who understands your plight, who understands that you want to live a life that is that includes security, both in your person, your freedoms, but also in your financial freedom, and you want the future to be better for your children than the past has been for you. Um, that person can go to Washington and get a lot of things done. And there's great
Yeah.
examples of good statesmen coming out of South Carolina and delivering from both sides of the aisle. We're not
Yeah.
getting that right now.
I'll speak to that right now, because when I first moved here, I was working for one company that I left, but I went to go work for Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, working for their government programs. And despite the fact that there's almost no universe where I agree with some of the social standings that Strom Thurmond had, I recognize that the reason that we had a lot of federal jobs for the state of South Carolina through programs like Medicare was because of Strom Thurmond and his staff. That was something that they made happen. And, like I said, I don't agree with Strom Thurmond on probably 95% of the social stances that he made. But
Right.
he brought jobs to South Carolina, or he
did.
assisted in bringing jobs to South Carolina. So I will not take away from that. So
No,
for
you can't.
years, people have called South Carolina a lock for the GOP. Is there any data or trends that you're seeing on the ground that the national pundits are just missing?
I think there's an entire demographic that has been unheard and uncounted for a very long time. Even, they say our state right now is about 28% African American. In the last census, there was a known undercount of African Americans and people of color in our state. So, that number of African Americans and Latinx and Hispanic descent, I believe, put that together, and we're over 30%. I think it's somewhere around 33% when you put us all together. That matters. That math matters. And what you're seeing on the ground, I'll give even a recent example with the No Kings rallies that you've been seeing in every city, major city in South Carolina, and some even very rural places and places you wouldn't expect. I was driving this past weekend out of Tegakay. And if you know anything about the town of Tegakay, Tegakay is very well off.
Oh.
And very white. Very well off and very white. So I'm leaving Tegakay. Yeah.
Lot of what do they call them? Trad wives up there in TK.
Yes. And when I tell you, at the entrance before you got to Highway 160, there were like 80 people out there with their signs, No Kings, and I know that wasn't all Democrats out there. I was down in Myrtle Beach a couple weeks ago at the last No Kings, and I met women who Republicans have been voting for, and people still think we register by party here. We don't. But they always say, I'm a registered Republican, right? But they are fed up with what's happening in our government. They're fed up with Donald Trump and everything that has to do with him. And in this race specifically, whether or not Lindsey Graham makes it out of this race, the alternatives are just as glued to Donald Trump as he is. So going into the general election, it is not going to be difficult for the Democrat that gets out of this primary to paint these folks for what they are. And they are not just anti-American and self-centered, but they're anti-people. Like they are really they're literally, you got Lynch who helped write the playbook for how we dismantle our Constitution in order to hand our country over to the oligarchs and the tech bros, right? So when you talk about the pathway to victory and the count, I believe that South Carolina already had the numbers to be a fair shade of purple, but because of the energy that is driving common sense and conscious-minded Republicans away from Donald Trump and anyone associated to him, they're not going to be able to count those people in the formula in determining how this election is going to shape out. I think that we have a lot more on our side than they have on theirs, and it's just up to us to deliver and execute in these elections.
Yeah, I don't think the rest of the nation understands what it's like to live in a state like South Carolina in respect to just how large and how strong the Black community, the minority community is and can be. Because you mentioned that the Black community in South Carolina makes up somewhere between 27 and 32% of the population. Okay. That is significantly larger per capita than anywhere else in the country. South Carolina has other than Mississippi, but as far as, because in the United States, the Black population is about 13 to 15% of the population, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. But when we had candidates like Hillary Clinton, who didn't find a way of really communicating and connecting with the Black community, the Black community didn't turn out to vote for her because there wasn't anything to connect to. She didn't feel genuine. And I'm not saying she wasn't. I'm just saying, but I know through friends that they just didn't feel like maybe she had their back, you know. So being able to connect to the Black community, I think, is one of the fundamental parts of campaigning in South Carolina, and the fact that your campaign recognizes right off the bat that is a community that absolutely has to hold as much or more value than the traditional voters that turn out in South Carolina is a step ahead. I'm not seeing that, and I say this honestly, I'm not seeing that in other statewide campaigns right now. There is focus on who it is that they think they're going to be running against, and not where their strengths lie right now. And ultimately, I say this having listened to Brandon speak in other podcasts and speak in interviews. He definitely has that connection, and I feel like everyone's welcome. That is what I get from Brandon. So I think that's
absolutely,
I've been saying it for weeks since he announced his campaign, is that he speaks the way I want to hear a candidate speak, and everything that I read, whether it's editorials or opinion pieces, Brandon is the type of candidate that I want to see campaign. Now, who he's running against, Annie Andrews, I see a lot of connection to her as well, in the sense that this is a woman who had who was a terrific pediatrician that ran a campaign against what is easily one of the most toxic individuals on the planet, Nancy
Tell me about
Mace.
it.
And it really took a toll on her. And what feels like is that she is still experiencing some of that campaign from before with Nancy Mace in how she speaks. I wish her the best of luck. Absolutely.
Same.
I can't. She probably won't come on the show. But between she and Brandon, there definitely is a sense that these are two candidates that absolutely would do very well for the people of South Carolina.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping. Do we have any debates that are potentially going to be scheduled here before June?
Yeah, so I don't know when you're going to air this, but we're about to start
Monday.
rattling the. We're about to start calling for debates because we're ready
That's
to
great.
debate and make sure the folks can make a educated choice between the two candidates, because they're, like you said, they'll both be great. They'll both be great folks. But there's some very stark differences when you're talking about your pathway to victory. We're only going to be able to win this race if we're able to pull in the folks I just talked about, but also increase African American turnout by 10% and expand the electorate by 15.
Okay.
Only one of these candidates have the experience doing that. Brandon has never lost a primary election, and he's overperformed in every election that he's been in. Not saying he's been in a ton, but he's run twice. He still has the record of being the youngest person to be the nominee in the 4th congressional district. But our connection to that demographic, when you're talking about African Americans and Black voters across the country making up only 13% of the nation's population. But just think, there would not be a Democratic Party without Black folks, period.
Yeah.
And the same goes in South Carolina. When you think about this primary election, nearly 60% of the people who are going to go out and vote will be African American and Black voters, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you got to talk to and relate to that community.
Yeah. But I still feel like, and this is just me, but the Democratic Party, not individuals in the Democratic Party, but they still miss the real opportunity to connect with that group of voters, in the sense that and I have plenty of friends that'll tell you they feel like they're assumed into the Democratic Party, that the Black community is just assumed to be Democrats, or assumed. I know plenty of individuals that live very conservative lives, that have worked in the same job and retired after years and years of loyalty to a company that didn't really do them well, and you almost get the sense that the Democrats expect the same out of the Black community, is that we'll represent you better than the Republicans will. But then it feels like it comes up short. I mean, people joke about the idea of reparations for individuals who have ties back to family members being slaves.
Yeah.
We're the richest fucking country on the planet ever.
Thank you for saying it. Thank you for saying it.
There has, at some point, someone absolutely has to recognize that what happened from the start of this country until the Civil War, and even after the Civil War, that there has to be some sort of reparation made for the family members of those that were put through that ultimate sin. I mean, it's not, the ultimate sin, murder, whatever. But it was
a lot of that included.
Yeah. And I'm not saying anyone should campaign on the idea of reparations, because obviously I think people in the Black community are going to recognize that they're pandering. But once someone's in power, it has to be something that somebody brings up.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe when I get elected president.
Hey, I'll be the first one to sign up to volunteer and donate. Maybe
I know I can sucker you into running that campaign.
Man.
So obviously, money is going to be an issue at some point. TV airtime has to be bought. What's the tipping point where the Army has to be supplemented by traditional fundraising.
Oh my God, we're there right now. We are
Okay,
really,
there you
you
go.
know. But here's the thing: I've been telling folks, think of these campaigns as a business, and you're investing in a business. And as an investor, you want the greatest ROI, return on your investment, right? Now, just look at what we've been able to accomplish with what we have. Brandon Brown has raised just over $200,000. He's still the only candidate that has campaign offices across the state. So we have campaign offices operating in every congressional district right now. He's the candidate with the most infrastructure. With if you count our partner campaigns, over 1,200 volunteers. He's the one who is literally moving an army across the state. And now we got to communicate because, although he has raised, and spent about $200,000, the opposition has raised 6 million and spent about 5 of that. But when you look at the internal polling and they're just a point apart from one another, which horse are you going to bet on? The one that is polling at about 27% and spent $200,000, or the one who's polling at 28% and spent $5 million? It a little bit in this race goes a long way. And that's where we are. And now we got to communicate across a broader spectrum and a broader audience. But we're in position to do that, and we're going to. I say we're a scrappy a group. We're the little engine that could, because we can, and we're going across this state and doing things in a way that traditional campaigns don't, and it's paying off for us. And literally, I can't wait. I'm trying to measure my words because I want to give our campaign strategies away on here. But I think
I
people
get it.
are going to be pleasantly surprised to see what this ragtag group of outcasts, as we've been called recently, have been able to do with this campaign, and how well we've been able to utilize the resources that we have.
Yeah. Well, second to last question. If
Yeah.
someone is listening right now and feels like the system is broken beyond repair, and I think you've answered it throughout the course of this, but why should they give Brandon a chance? Why should he be the catalyst for this new progressive South?
At some point, I think we have to really bank on this question of what do we have to lose at this point. And the answer is a whole effing lot, right? And we need to be able to bank on someone who knows how to win, who's putting people first, who is not accepting money from shady places, whose values align with ours, and someone that we can trust that when they go into that room and sit at that table, that we can't enter and where there's no chair for us at that table, that we can trust that they're going to do the things that represent us well and be in our best interest. Brandon Brown is that candidate, and it's not just by theory or what I heard. It's by action, what he's done. From his time being vice president of 3 HBCUs and saving the accreditation of these institutions, bringing them out of financial hardship, helping over 4,000 young people pay for college through his foundation and his family's pockets, so that they can have a brighter future, to going into the tax office in Chatham County and unearthing, I hate to say it, but it is what it is, corruption and misuse, and turning things around for the people, saving people money where it matters most, to even now. When you look at this campaign, is not just showing up and asking you for your vote. It's showing up and asking you what matters to you. What do you need? When the government shut down the last time and folks were going without food stamps, it was Brandon Brown that dug into his personal pockets and connected with other friends and purchased over 22,000 pounds of food and delivered to communities, including federal workers across South Carolina. It was Brandon Brown that showed up even now in helping folks, who are having trouble with transportation to or from work or to or from school or in their housing situations. These are stories that he doesn't tell himself, but a lot of things that he just has always done. Even now, we got a truckload of water being about to be delivered to a community that can't drink the water that's coming out of their taps. He's showing that he's putting people above politics and purpose above power. And I just hope that you'll give someone a try that may not raise the most money, that may not get the most airtime, and that may not get the blessing of the kingmakers of our party. But we know that this person is going to fight for us day in and day out, 9 times or 10 times out of 10. And we know that he has a track record of winning. So let's bet on the horse that will run for us for the first time in a long time. And that's Brandon Brown.
Absolutely. Last question. The guy that dressed up as Trump in the announcement video, does he also do voices?
Man, that guy there, he does a little bit of everything. He was a character. I sat with him in that church next to him before he did his role. He went out and did his thing. Yeah. And we were just cracking up the entire time. Like, I still have his number. We're going to use him again for something else. But that was hilarious.
That was fantastic. And great cinematography. The whole ad was fantastic. Brandon absolutely has a very compelling presence in front of the camera too. So
awesome. Yeah, he does.
I think that I think he's an outstanding candidate, and I think that his nomination, when it happens, is absolutely going to be one that rocks the state. So,
and it's going to be Brandon the one for Upson, the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brandon Upson, of course, campaign manager for Brandon P. Brown. You can go check out Brandon P. Brown's website and make donations there to help keep this movement going. You can check links in the show notes. Brandon, I regret not telling you just to come to the house, but you are closer to home than you are if you had been here. But next time I see you, absolutely big hugs. I'm not letting go because genuinely, podcast listener, I adore this man. He is absolutely, regardless of what party you're in, Brandon Upson's just looking to better make the lives of people in South Carolina's lives better, and running Brandon P. Brown's campaign, I think is one of those movements that absolutely will have a grand effect. So I appreciate you.
No, thank you so much, bro. And I'm so happy to be here on episode 301. This is gonna be the best one yet.
100%. Don't set your sights too high. Let's keep it within the sphere of likelihood. All right. Brandon, thank you very much for being on with me. I am going to wrap up the episode. That is going to do it for episode number 301. Again, thank you to Brandon Upson for being on here. Links to all of our past episodes, podcast platforms, merchandise, and social media are available on our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. And if you think our financial model of giving away free content and entertainment is silly and you're in the giving mood, why not becoming an official Nothinger and support the show? Members get early access to this episode as well as exclusive content. You can visit members.theallaboutnothing.com, or you can find a link on our webpage. You can also give a one-time donation through the same link. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can call and leave us a message, 803-672-0533, or you can email the show at theallaboutnothing.com. You can also join our Discord server, links found on our webpage. Thanks for listening, everybody. You all stay safe, be kind, and
and keep your hands to yourself.
The All About Nothing podcast is a product of Big Media and produced and engineered by me, Barrett Gruber. Thanks to Cake for our intro music, Sick of You. You can follow Everything Cake the band at cakemusic.com. Thanks to Muff the producer for our outro music. You can follow Muff on Instagram at Muff the producer. You can follow me across social media by visiting Linktree/Barrett Gruber. And you can follow Zach King on Linktree/AAN Zach. Want to support the show? Visit our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com, and become a member. There are several tiers available that give you early access to episodes as well as exclusive content. To find links to our social media, podcast platforms, and merchandise to support the show, as well as past episodes, visit theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can email the show at theallaboutnothing.com, or you can call our number and leave a message. Dial 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is more than you can handle, check out our sister shows. What the Pod Was That with Carrie, Zach, and myself. Welcome to Wonderland with Ami. Politically Speaking with Erica, Kirsten, and Emily. And Black, White, and Blue in the South with Dr. Jameel Brooks and Bill Kimmler. Please subscribe and share this show. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe and punch that notification bell. Thank you for listening, and hear us next week. The preceding podcast is solely owned by the host or hosts and is distributed by Big Media, LLC. Copyright 2026.